Owning an iconic American classic car is a dream for many of us. The muscle, the style, the history. But most classics today are either too expensive or almost impossible to find. The good news? Some legendary American cars are still surprisingly easy to buy. Today, we're looking at 5 iconic American classic cars you can still find on the used market, and a couple might even surprise you.
1965 to 1973 Ford Mustang. When it comes to classic American muscle cars, there aren't many that are more iconic than the first generation of the Ford Mustang. This was one of the big cars of the muscle car heyday, and it brought big power in a package a lot of Americans could afford. They were also very easy to tune, something that made them incredibly appealing to people who like to do less than legal activities with their cars. As a result, they sold like hotcakes. Even to this day, it's one of Ford's most iconic and successful models. Because the Mustang was such a sales hit, even these first-generation examples are still relatively plentiful on the used market. While you might find it difficult to get hold of one of the coveted Boss models, they were only produced in limited numbers. There are plenty of regular V8 ones knocking around. Whatever variant of the Mustang you choose, you're guaranteed to get loads of enjoyment from driving and tinkering with it. 1970 to 1981 Chevrolet Camaro. Another mainstay of the golden age of muscle cars was the second-generation Chevrolet Camaro. The Camaro was more of a handling-focused sports car than an all-out drag racing machine, but it still had that all-important V8 option. Some of the V8 engine variants of the Camaro, such as the Z28, have since passed into legend. Combine this with its styling being generally well-liked, and this generation of the Camaro has ended up becoming a proper American icon. Chevrolet sold a lot of these cars during this early 70s to early 80s time period. As a result, there are still loads of Camaros around on the used market. Some models were only made in limited numbers, so those will be very difficult to get hold of if you really want them. Otherwise, regular variants of this generation of Camaro are always around. 1962 to 1964 Ford Galaxy. There are plenty of big 1960s American land yachts out there. Not many of them are as iconic, though, as the Ford Galaxy. These cars have always been appreciated by enthusiasts, and the top-of-the-line 500 model has great performance even by today's standards. Some Galaxies from this era have even found recent success in historic racing. The Galaxy is an iconic American classic you can find very easily. Plenty of them is always around on the used market. That even extends to the most desirable 500 models. A huge amount of Galaxies were produced, so lots of them have managed to survive the decades since. 1965 to 1970 Dodge Coronet. The Dodge Coronet is an American classic that sometimes gets overlooked, but that doesn't mean that it's not iconic. The Coronet was available with quite a few different engine options. This included some big block units such as the legendary 440 Magnum engine. Putting these big block units into a relatively small car like the Coronet turned it into an absolute beast, with performance that's impressive even by today's standards. The Coronet was a decently big seller for Dodge. As a result, plenty of them are still around, and they can be found easily on the used market. Those super desirable big block variants won't exactly be cheap though. 1968 to 1970 Dodge Charger. The Dodge Charger of the late 1960s is arguably one of the most famous muscle cars of all time. It's been immortalized in pop culture thanks to its appearances on the big screen in Bullitt and the Fast and the Furious. Quite a few different variants of the Charger were made during this period. The most desirable version of the Charger is the RT with its big block V8 power plant. This is the variant that appeared in Bullitt and the one everyone thinks of when it comes to this generation of the car. The Dodge Charger of this era isn't exactly the cheapest muscle car to get hold of, but it is still relatively easy to find them. Even the super desirable big block Chargers are relatively easy to get hold of, although you might have to wait around for one that's in concours or near concours condition.